I went to the site. I had come up with some incentive plan for the leasing team, and after a certain number of leases, they got an additional bonus bump. At another level, they got another bonus bump. So I was talking to the leasing agent and says, "Okay, well, explain to me your bonus plan this month. Aren't you excited?" And she looked at me and says, "Well, I'm not really sure. It's something over a certain number. Not really sure." I'm saying, "Great. I'm glad I have a bonus plan that incentivizes you. You don't even know what it is." Well, when you add them all up, they're like $200 higher than everybody else. No wonder they're sitting at 83% occupied. They're never going to get full. All the comps are way lower. Well, unless they have some special sauce, those extra fees got to come down. All these fees, these third-party management companies are layering on. The $15 resident liability fee, which you think would be renter's insurance, but it's really not. And all these different little fees, the tech fee, the locker fee, all these different fees that get added to it. And they're mandatory. Look, the residents aren't stupid. They're going to say, okay, what's my average utility bill? What's my total monthly cost? Okay, all in is $1,500. Across the street is $1,300. Well, I'm going to $1,300. And you can also, you'll see a lot of times the filter is set up where it's anything under 100 is not included, or 300 or 500, whatever the number is. So now all of a sudden, the bad debt looks over, it's under control, we're doing a better job. All you do is change the filter. But if you're the owner and you don't understand that, and you don't understand how the reports were built, then you're being misled. We discovered that they were not there 2 or 3 times. They weren't there at all. So we discovered they weren't even showing up, even though they were telling me we were, and we were being charged payroll as if we were, but they weren't even there. Once they started showing up, imagine that, we started leasing. Wow, they answered the telephone.
What was one thing that you learned the hard way when you hire a third-party management company that owners should know before they're signing the contract?
Well, I tell everybody that utilities, now I've had 3 different third-party management companies I've hired, and all 3 of them cost me north of $50,000 on the utility setup. So here's what happens. You close on the deal, and usually there's a transfer from Conservice or Simple Bills or something like that. And there's usually a lag. And that lag, when they're not billing the customers back for the utilities, sometimes it stretches. And in student housing, it become very acute because a lot of times, depending on the timing of when you close the deal and the people move out, you may not get a chance to actually collect it. So now I've noticed in the last deals that I've done with third-party managers that I've lost almost $50,000 on each occasion. And I was telling them in advance, saying, "This is going to happen. You need to get on top of this. You need to get ahead of this. You need to get on ahead of this." And they did, and it's very frustrating. Now you can say, "Well, Ken, you should go after them. You should sue them." So this goes into the whole switching cost. So property management companies do have a moat. So I love moats. Moats are things that a business has that separate it from other businesses. And once you're with a property management company, switching is not easy. You have to have a working relationship with them. You're not talking about a $10 million asset. You're talking about a $50 million asset. So changing it and changing who's on the site and changing all the processes and procedures is very expensive. And whenever a deal closes, you see all this attention and effort on training the staff, on setting up their software and doing all this. What you don't see is the focus on the customer. You don't see the focus on the leasing. You don't see the focus on the work orders. They pay lip service to it, but that's not where the focus is. And you can tell just by looking at what's going on the site during the transition. So transitions are painful by nature. So if I were looking at a third-party management company or even your own management company, because we like to think that, you have your own management company, you don't have any problems. Well, that's bullshit. You have just as many problems. The difference is no one's managing you. A lot of the third-party management companies, they want to spend stuff to you instead of just coming out. And I get it. They don't want to get fired. So if they screw something up, which inevitably your own management company, they're going to screw stuff up too. I mean, we're humans. We're going to mess stuff up. It's how we respond to it. And instead of trying to spin it and say, well, it's this, it's that, it's something else, and pointing over here, pointing over there. I remember a call. We were on a call with a property management company. This is several years ago. And they went way over. And I was like, this is ridiculous. I was on the phone with my partner and we were talking to the regional VP. And I was like, how can you be this far over budget? This makes no sense. And she's like, Ken, don't you understand? Those carpets were threadbare. Those dishwashers are 12 years old. They all had to be replaced. So I pulled up the financial statement. I started looking down at the general ledger, and they were just duplicate POs. They weren't over budget like that at all. They just simply made an accounting mistake. But rather than telling me and researching this, I'll get back to you, Ken. They just made up some bullshit.
Well, I think probably like that regional knew that their job was on the line. If they're gonna lose you as a client, and the first reaction was to get defensive. That's just what I'm guessing. Instead, just saying, "Hey, you know what? It's human nature. Yeah, getting defensive, like defend your turf, your job,
Yeah.
this situation.
Yeah.
So that's very interesting. Now, before replacing a manager, what are the things that an owner should be looking at? How they should actually assess and understand, is this actually the manager? Is it the asset, right? What is this something that I missed during the due diligence or underwriting process? And it's actually something that they can make something successful that was never set up to be successful. How do you determine that?
Well, I always go back to the 5 Ps. I wrote a book on this. I'm not plugging it. I'm simply saying this is just a framework I use to determine whether or not the management company is doing their job. The first P is people. Is the staff fully? Are they fully staffed? Sometimes you got properties that are running half staffed, and you're wondering why they're not performing. Well, you don't have to wonder. There's not any people doing the job. Sometimes they have the wrong people. They're not trained properly. The AC, they don't have an AC guy, so they're calling out third party ACs constantly. Well, shocking. Get the guy trained or get someone who is trained. So the people part is critical. You got to one step further. What's the incentives? How are they incentivizing the people on the site? What are they paying them? What are they bonused on? Often you'll go to the site. This happened to me actually last week. I went to the site. I had come up with some incentive plan for the leasing team, and after a certain number of leases, they got an additional bonus bump. At another level, they got another bonus bump. So I was talking to the leasing agent and says, okay, well, explain to me your bonus plan this month. Aren't you excited? And she looked at me and says, well, I'm not really sure. It's something over a certain number. Not really sure. I'm saying, great. I'm glad I have a bonus plan that incentivizes you. You don't even know what it is. And you laugh, but I've seen that again and again. I've seen it with maintenance supervisors when I ask them about their bonus plan and how they get it, and they're getting paid it, but they don't understand how they impact it or how it actually ties back to them. So people is a huge part. And I would say 9 out of 10 times, most of the problems on your properties are people related, but that's huge. And that's a lot of these 5 Ps, they all interrelate. So the next one is pricing. Now, is your property just overpriced? Actually, this is something that I just wrote about today, actually. So I was underwriting a deal, and the deal was like $1,200 in rent. I said, that's interesting. I was looking at the comps. And it's okay, we can push the rents. And I started looking at all the fees. They have a tech fee, they have a parking fee of 120, they have all these fees, and they're all mandatory. Well, when you add them all up, they're like $200 higher than everybody else. No wonder they're sitting at 83% occupied. They're never going to get full. All the comps are way lower. Well, unless they have some special sauce, those extra fees got to come down. So that's an example of pricing where you miss the pricing. Now, of course, we didn't buy the deal; we got to it. But I've seen this a lot that we do the underwriting and we don't realize all these fees these third party management companies are layering on. The $15 resident liability fee, which you think would be renter's insurance, but it's really not. And all these different little fees, the tech fee, the locker fee, all these different fees that get added to it, and they're mandatory. You're not, and look, the residents aren't stupid. They're going to say, okay, what's my average utility bill? What's my total monthly cost? Okay, all in is 1,500. Across the street is 1,300. Well, I'm going to the 1,300. And that's so pricing is a critical one to really understand where you sit relative to the market pricing. Next is promotions. Are you running ads? You'd be surprised. A lot of companies, they don't even run ads, and maybe you're in a really tight market where you don't have to, but sometimes you need to. And sometimes the ads they're running are terrible. So, what's their website look like? I was looking at a website recently, and they had the old Latin, where it just sets up the base filler where it says about your neighborhood and all that. It was not even filled out, and that had been there for years, and no one had even bothered to fill the damn thing out. So I did an analysis and I looked at 150 websites in Atlanta, all the class A's, all the big boys. And I found 3 patterns that repeated over and over again. Very template. Everybody's just a template, cookie cutter template. And by the way, they're not cheap. The management companies, the designers, they charge $5,500 to $6,000 to put these websites together. They're just copy and paste. There's no originality. There's very little difference, and a lot of them don't have all the core things, the questions the consumer asks. But that's a whole separate thing. So promotion is a whole bunch of things all wrapped up into that. It's your referral process. How big is your referral? Do you push it? It's this promotion is probably for me the biggest thing I did not understand. And I've really made a deep dive into copywriting and marketing, and all I've revealed is how stupid I was and how ignorant I was about marketing. And all I did was copy what everybody else was doing. And by the way, that's what most of us do. All right, next is the product. And this is the easiest one. Do you have a functionally obsolete product? So, for example, you have a 2-1. Everybody else has 2-2s. Well, if you're a customer, you're going to walk in. I don't want to share a bathroom. I want that extra bathroom. If it's similar price, that's where you're going to go. You may even pay more just to have your own bathroom. So that's a functionally obsolete product, or it doesn't have washer and dryer connections. Oh, well, you need to add that, or you don't need to buy the property. because it puts you at a functional disadvantage to your competitors. So that's something when you're looking at it saying, did I do it correctly? That's something you would want to look at. Next is the process. The process is all encompassing of everything they're doing. So what are they doing right? What are they doing wrong? It's everything from the funnel when the customer comes in to how they handle work orders to how they handle bad debt to how they do their accounting reports. The process is this all encompassing thing. So the 5 keys are a framework. I look at all the deals I go to and say to myself, okay, where are we failing? And you might find 2 or 3 things that are really the linchpin or the biggest constraint on the property, but usually it's something with the people side. There's someone screwing something up. Now, sometimes it's something simple, like the process is just broken and it's just not set up correctly and they need to fix it.
Again, what's the title of your book? I want to put it in our show notes
Yeah.
for people to be
It's
able to
the
find.
5 Ps of property management. So here's the thing about the book. I've learned so much over the last 5 years. There's some good stuff in there. At the time I was pouring. It was during COVID, and I wrote all the things I could think about related to this. But I look back at the promotion chapter in particular, and possibly the pricing chapter. I've learned so much more, and I would write a totally different book on those 2 chapters alone. A lot of the other stuff stands. I think the interviewing process, how you go about building incentives, that type of stuff. I think that's very important. But I wouldn't say to myself, "Oh, you got to buy this. This is a page turner." It's not. It's a boring book on property management. But if you like property management and you want to learn some actual takeaway techniques, well, there's some interesting stuff in there.
What are some signs that your third-party management company is actually damaging? It's affecting your property value before they show up in reports, NOI, and things that are basically too late to fix, right? You typically learn to the reports when the damage is already done.
Yeah.
What are some signs that you could like pick up on before those reports are actually showing uh, the uh, the extent of the damage?
Well, I think I go back to the people. When you start seeing turnover on your core people, your maintenance supervisor leaves. You can expect in the next 60 days, if they don't replace them or put some additional staffing at the site, to start having higher turnover related to not getting units turned. Your key leasing agent leaves. You can expect in the future, unless they get busy and hire somebody quickly, that you're going to see a slowdown in leasing. So these core people, they're leading indicators. Are you fully staffed? Are they fully trained? Do they actually have the right incentives? So I would look there first on the site level. Next, go tour your property. Nothing replaces going to the property. It's always an education. You go to the property, you talk to the staff, you ask them, what's the stupidest thing we make you do? What dumb things do you have to deal with today? Listen to the calls. You'd be amazed when you listen to the customer calls, when you sit in the office and just listen to what the people are complaining about, to what the leasing agents are telling the prospects. And you'd be amazed at some of the stuff that's said. And you're like, no, that's not right at all. You don't need to say that. Like I discovered recently that I had this incredible referral program. And I was telling the team they need to be pushing this. And they're like, oh, yeah, we're pushing it, but we're only doing it to people who are currently living here. And I was like, no, 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 no. Every single time, every single way, you should be pushing this to everybody. And that was just one leasing agent. There was one who was doing it, and the rest of them were not. I was like, well, we got to get everybody to consistently do it. So you wouldn't know that sitting in the corporate office. And it has a real impact.
So Ken, incredible value here so far that you share in a conversation. I also know that you have a couple of very practical pieces of material that you created for the audience. Would you like to share them? And what is the best use for those particular documents?
Well, I think that every company out there, whether you're an owner manager or a third party manager, or if you just own the properties, you should have an audit process. And the audit process ideally should be quarterly. You can do it more frequently if you like, but the audit process should be checking on those variables under the 5 P. Different companies, like a Class A, is going to be different than a tax credit deal. So use it as a framework, and I'll be happy to share it, but it would be a framework that you could then use to build out your own. And I won't give you all my data because the data is based on me and my portfolio. You need to build it based off of you and your portfolio and what's important to you. So, for example, you may have a tax credit deal. Well, you have to have tax credit compliance. So that should be a big part of your process to make sure that's being done correctly. And a lot of times you pay a third party company to go and audit your tax credit information to make sure it's right. Well, you can go ahead and make sure it's being done instead of waiting on that. Just to make, I'm not saying eliminate that because you have to pay for that compliance anyway. But what I'm saying to you is you should make sure your processes capture what they should be doing, making sure your funnel's not broken. I mean, you get into a lot of detail, and I will. It's a very detailed checklist, but it basically will give you ideas to take it and make it your own. And that would be what I would do with that type of tool. And included in that, there's going to be a website school. Now, a lot of these are Claude skills, and I don't know how advanced the audience is, but Claude is what I use on a daily basis, and I have actual digital employees that I've built. Cato is my financial analyst. I have a chief of staff I call Dojo. So I have different ones, and these agents, they do different things for me, and they actually run complete. So I'll just delegate the task to them. Now, I have to inspect, but you have to inspect with employees, so it's no different. Now, sometimes they have lobotomies and they're dumb, and you have to say, why did you think that? That was dumb. But once you train them enough and you get them up to speed, the output is incredible. But it's a matter of training. And I think that's a big thing about the AI. Everybody likes to talk that AI doesn't work or AI is stupid or whatever it is. But I will say this, if you train it incredibly well, you give it lots of examples and you give it feedback. The feedback is a learning process. You wouldn't take a junior employee, make them do it one time and say, oh, it's stupid. You have to give it over and over till it gets good.
We gotta make sure that we're gonna have the links to these documents for everybody that's watching, so we can make it very valuable for you watching us today.
It's time gate entry systems were reimagined. Tired of dealing with clickers, key fobs, broken call boxes, and keypads everyone has the code to? Imagine managing multiple properties and realizing your keys are miles away. With Gatewise, access is in your pocket. No codes, no hassle. Residents can let in guests or deliveries from anywhere with a single tap. Gatewise integrates with your property management system, automatically revoking access when residents move out. The Gatewise management portal makes it easy to control every access point remotely from any device. No dedicated computer required, just smart, flexible control at your fingertips. Gatewise also supports self-storage, giving your team cloud-based control over tenant access. Fast, secure, and fully remote. More convenience for your residents, more time and cost savings for your team.
Ken, the next question is, when you interview a owner manager that's also doing third-party management and you consider them in a run to manage your property, what are some questions that you're asking them to determine if they're going to be a good fit or they're just going to be, focusing on their own assets and you always going to be that red-headed child in their portfolio?
Well, I think a couple of questions have to go there. First off, you want to know how many units they're actually managing, owner managed versus managed, because obviously the size of that tells a big difference. If they have 10,000 owner managed and they have 1,000 third party managed, that might make you a little nervous. If the inverse were true, might make you feel a little more comfortable. They're more focused on that. So, what percentage of their business is actually, are they really a management company or are they truly just an owner operator and they're just outsourcing their excess capacity to third party management? So, that would be one. The next thing I would look at is the concentration of apartments. So one of the things that the industry knows very well, if you have a sister property that's 4 states away and there's no help coming. So I like to buy my management companies to have multiple properties in close proximity to the existing properties they're managing. And the reason is they can send additional support. Now, some of the large nationals like Greystar, they're so big, they can pull people from all over the place and send them there. And that's fine too. But of course, you have to remember that costs a lot of money to fly them. There's been an explosion in G&A cost. So I was actually looking at this. On some of the deals, the G&A cost used to be $218.
For those that don't know, what is the G&A?
Yeah, that's general administrative costs. So that's going to be your software cost. That's going to be your eviction cost. That's going to be, it could be your renter's insurance, all the things that the management company a lot of times is driving. That's your education and training costs. That's going to be your uniform cost. It's like a bucket catch-all for all these things. And I've noticed that cost just explode. I've seen it go up more than 200, 300% on some of the properties. And it depends on the third-party manager. So a lot of them will add these additional costs that have to be picked up. Now, in fairness to them, there are other income pieces, like for example, the renter insurance. So usually you're supposed to be making some sort of profit share on that, but it goes down to the G&A cost. So the G&A explodes, but you do get the offset at the top line. Now sometimes they net it at the top line. You won't see it; it'll just be a net number. But sometimes it's actually reported below. Some companies also put in G&A utility submetering and other types, but it's basically a catch-all for these types of software and other types of things. So G&A costs goes way up, and travel is another one. So anytime you have a property that's 4 states away and your regional lives 4 states away and they're having to get on an airplane, very expensive to get them there. Then you have hotel, you have rental car, and you're paying for that every single time they show up. And most of the management companies, the regional comes once a quarter. I like to go every month minimum to my properties, and I get it. If there's a fire burning, they're probably at those properties a lot more, and I get that, especially if they're spread too thin. So another question you're going to ask is how stretched are your regionals? How many properties are they handling? So some people say, oh, it's 5,000 units is way too much. Well, that may be way too much, but if it's
Depending on the type of asset, right? Because if it's an A+ asset, it's not the same as a C-.
That's right, or one that's in a major lease up, or one that's got a major renovation going. So it depends. So that's why you have to look at that. And then also, having said those types of things we talked about, the density, I want to make sure that I also don't like it when I feel that they're actually competing with me in the same marketplace. So I know when I go to bid on properties, if I'm bidding and I look at over here, my management company is also bidding, their ownership group is bidding on the same property. I don't like that, because then how do I trust them during the due diligence process? There's a real issue. It's a real conflict of interest for me. So I historically have not used owner managers like that. A lot of them approach me. I've talked to them, and look, they have a good game. They definitely understand the business really well, and I get it. But for me, it's just hard for me to get comfortable. Now, maybe they only buy Class A, and I don't. I happen to buy Class A's, but let's say you only buy Class C's. Well, then you're like, okay, well, but then maybe they're not the right fit if they only do Class A.
Yeah, prove me that you can manage my distressed properties.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned ways for property management, third-party management companies to make extra money beyond the management fees. What are the streams of income that concern you when you're vetting a third-party management company?
Well, I remember this well. Back when I had 23,000 units, one of the large supply companies, I won't say their name, they came to us and we were negotiating the discounts, the annual year where we talk about the budget and own supply companies. And they said, oh, we'll be happy to pay for your management company's party and some other things. And we're not talking about small dollar amounts. And I looked at it and said, really? You'll pay for that? I said, how about you just give me the discount on my properties? So I know that there are incentives. I don't know the exact name, but they do contributions. They pay for meals. They do different things, and it reduces the cost. And of course, it's a benefit to the management company. So that's one. I wouldn't call it a kickback from the vendor. That sounds dirty, but maybe there's some the commissions or something like that. Definitely with some of the insurance companies where there's a fee that gets paid. Who gets those fees? Does the owner get it, or does the management company get it? Some of the different revenue sources that are out there. I've seen cable, internet fees as well that have been split. Some of those fees go to the owner. Some of those fees go directly to the management company. So I think you got to be just mindful of those type of things. Procurement, which ties back to some of them just override and they just have a fee whenever they go and by the way, that's fine if they're doing a valuable job of finding you products that you wouldn't normally find and they mark it up and it's disclosed and you know about it. I'm more concerned about things that are not disclosed. Pass-throughs. So some companies will take certain cost, and it could be some administrative cost or something like that, and they will pass it through to the ownership. And it'll show up. I've seen it as a property website marketing cost. What is that? Well, it's the overall cost we spend, but they divide it amongst all the properties. So that's something that you see corporate chargebacks like that are pushed through on and by the way, it shows up usually in the G&A cost is where we see these kind of costs. So I would go through a line item and look at those costs and really understand and make sure they're truly disclosing all those fees. And look, this unbundling is going across the industry, whether airline, whatever it might be, everybody's unbundling. So it's not surprising that the third-party management companies are unbundling and pushing it. And look, I want to be very clear. I'm not suggesting that they're fraudulent or they're bad people. There are a lot of really good people in the industry and the third-party management company. I think they get a bad rap, as I pointed out earlier, because it's a thankless job. If they're doing well, it's because the market and it has very little to do with them. When they suck, you're like, wow, you guys really suck, and you have specific examples. But I would always point this out too for any of you owner managers out there. Be honest with yourself. You know you have problems in your organization as well. The difference is you can see them a lot quicker, and you have ultimate power to change.
When a third-party management company recommends a vendor for a large project, right, whether that's a renovation or something that comes in with a high price tag, what's your process of thinking to determine if this is something that is really a benefit for working with a large company that does volume work with a particular vendor, or maybe there's like some discounts involved that you're not seeing. They're seeing the advantages on a back end.
Well, again, I think this depends on the type of property, the type of operator you are. If you actually are in the value add and you actually are doing a lot of renovations, I would not necessarily count on any third party manager to take care of that work for me. But let's just say that you're a relatively stable property and you have a particular issue that popped up and you're busy and they bring you a set of vendors. There has to be a certain level of trust. Now, look, you can call around, you can ask other people bids. One of the things I like to do is I like to take the actual scope and proposals and dump them into ChatGPT and have it break it down for me. Because a lot of times you can see, like, what's the base cost of this? Like, how much does it cost? I'll give you a great example of this. We looked at a property. This was a 923 unit deal we had in DC, and the hallway cost, they were cleaning it was ridiculous. And I said to the people, I said, who's this vendor? Well, they've always used them. And the lady came in and she was very professional and all this. And I sat down and I broke out, well, how many people do you have? How much of the cleaning materials? I just sat down and put a calculator and broke it all out. I was like, this is ridiculous. I said, this is like 100% markup. I said, I want to bid this out. She immediately came back in and dropped it to like $13,000. And we was like 23. I was like, whoa. So that concerned me. I ended up getting somebody else because it made me realize she was overcharging and making a huge margin all along. And all I did was simply break down the hours. Well, how many people do you have? And I said, okay, what's the materials? What's the cost? And then I said, okay, now let's take the margin. Whoa, I get 15, 20%, but 100% on service contract? No, I don't think so.
When it comes down to access to the PMS system and other systems, Ken, what are some non-negotiable things that you would not agree not to have full access to, full visibility into? Because I know that typically there's like owner reports, monthly reports, and packages they're sent on a daily basis, but that information is like controlled at the source, and then that could be interpreted and like played in so many ways. What are some non-negotiables for you? Some system accesses that you would not hire a company without.
Yeah, I think that you can require as the owner that you want read-only access to your actual operating system, whether it be your RD Entrada, AppFolio, whatever it is, and that you can be able to drill down to the general ledger and see actually what's going on. You should be able to pull all the system reports that you need. But see, here's the thing: you have to have someone who's able to interpret that on your team and understand what they mean. And you have to understand the filtering effect. So what I mean by that is, let's say, for example, you get the bad debt report. And the standard report filters 30 days and 60 days, and it drops off 90. I want to see all of bad debt. I want to know, are they still in? Why are they still here? So you could easily filter and say, well, look how much our bad debt dropped. But that's just bullshit reporting because they are not out yet. So what's the status with these people? Why are they still here? So you got to see all of it. And you'll see a lot of times the filter is set up where it's anything under 100 is not included, or 300 or 500, whatever the number is. So now all of a sudden, the bad debt looks well, it's under control. We're doing a better job. All you do is change the filter. But if you're the owner and you don't understand that and you don't understand how the reports were built, then you're being misled. Maybe it's intentional. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's honest. But if you don't know to look, how would you know?
You mentioned earlier in a conversation something along the lines of the cost of switching, right? It makes it very hard for you to fire a third party management company, hire another one because there's a cost associated with switching companies. Now, there's also a cost associated with having a bad management company. And how do you balance the two? Like, where do you draw the line and how do you do an analysis that you're basically deciding, hey, at this point, I think that the cost of keeping this company in place is like significantly higher than just my cost of switching.
Well, obviously, fraud's the first thing. If in fact you see that someone is stealing, and I'm not talking about necessarily at the site level, that does happen, but if you actually see it, corporate fraud of some sort, that would be a concern. I've seen that before. I won't go into that. And then that's immediate, just fire them. You have no choice. They're dishonest. But assuming it's just an honest mistake, which happens, you have to go back and think about the cost of how much it's going to take to change over. Because anytime you change management companies, you have to change new software. Well, that's 2 weeks of dark time where they're transferring over the data set. They're not going to be leasing. They're going to be focused on the software. That's also retraining the staff. Then your management team on the site, they're going to be afraid of who their new boss is. Anytime you have a change, there's always fear. What's the incentive program? Are you going to have to give different bonuses or different package? Now you got to get new uniforms because their company requires this uniform. Now they have to go through all these new certifications, so they didn't have to. All these different things. So it's definitely painful to switch. I only switch if I absolutely have to. I would simply say press harder on the people in charge and really push for change, because at any given day, there's only a handful of levers that you can pull as the owner. You can fire them. That's true. But the question is, could you get the same results with the exact same team by pushing hard on certain variables to say, you know what, this is not going to work. I need this, this, and this change. Now you can't overwhelm them. And I look, I admit I get really in the grain and details, and sometimes I'm a pain in the ass to deal with, but I try not to overwhelm them. I want to have less, not more, and focus on the most important constraint and remove that and then move to the next one. Because it's very easy to, well, they got screwed this up, they screwed that up, they screwed this up. Let's fix it all at once. And you throw it, and then it rolls downhill to your on-site team. And they're the ones doing it. And then they get behind and they're not doing their job, taking care of the customer. So you have to be very careful. So this, I think there was a post you wrote, and I put something about this. Whenever I take over a property that's been mismanaged, one of the first things I do is come in with contractors and we fix all the work orders. Just come in with my contractors, give them all the work orders. The reason is, if you have a property that has 500 work orders outstanding, you already got a lot of pissed off residents. Everybody's upset. Everybody's angry. The maintenance team's already running full force. They're usually probably short staffed. They probably don't have a fully stocked maintenance thing. And what you want to do is set them up where basically they're going to succeed. You get their shop organized. You get all the materials. You get all the equipment. You make sure they're fully staffed. You get them basically reset so they have 0 work orders outstanding, and now they can function properly. If not, you're trying to push on a string, and that's not going to work. You have to pull the string.
It's music to my ears. Years back, I was in a maintenance director position, and we had a property struggling from a maintenance standpoint. It was based in Houston. And at the time, everybody, like regional manager and also president of the management company, questioned the ability of the service manager to, was this too big of a task for him? And I had conversations, I looked at the numbers and everything. And the more I understood about the property operations, I wasn't quite sure that replacing that person would be the right decision. So I went and I put everything on the line. I told the president of the management company, please allow me to do this. I want to send a couple of our folks from Atlanta to help them out, to assess, right, people that I trust, not only help them with the work, but also assess the person's ability, to manage staff, to manage workload, to manage everything. I'll report back to you. Sure enough, they sign off, and 2 weeks later, we got the work orders, which they were like running very high, 70, 80 average. Open requests. We got them down to single digits. And that service manager, we put him in a position to be successful, and he proved to be one of the best decisions that I helped make at the company. Really, this happened in 2019. That person is still running that site today.
Yeah.
Like, they could have been fired if it wasn't for asking for the chance that you typically give your teams. So I think that goes to say for all owners and even for managers to make sure that before you make a call to fire a service manager or your maintenance team, make sure that you put them in a position to succeed. Because if they never in a position to succeed, chances are the people you replace them with are not gonna be in a position to succeed either. And you're just gonna have like a revolving door continue to move, and then with no better results, probably worse. How about having a sales playbook? How many companies you hire that actually, as part of their package, show you that there's a playbook that actually their leasing agents abide by, And this is like, we're not here like freestyling, right? Everybody has, I have my own style. I have my own style. I say my own style. And I'm asking this because from a recent experience, I'm in process of helping with, selecting some sales professionals, and I'm quite astonished by the fact that a lot of folks that I talk to don't show a structure. And I don't analyze it from a expert standpoint, but just from a layman perspective, I understand enough to understand that you don't have a structure. You just kind of winging things and hope for the best. So back to the question, did you ever hire or did you ever interview a company that came in and said, part of the package is we have a sales book, a playbook that
Yeah.
we use?
So I'll tell you that a lot of the companies have these books. Now, the question you have to ask yourself is how often are they used? Often the training is watching videos. Take a tour and then throw them on the phone and see what they do. The feedback has to be instant. It has to be real time. And if you're not downloading your transcripts, you can throw it into AI and reviewing what your team is saying and listening to some of them, you're missing out. There's a wealth of information. What are the objections? What are they saying wrong? You may have a new leasing agent that you think's well trained, but unless you're testing and actually listening and confirming. So I take my leasing agents and we go on tours. I ask them questions, and I just did this last week where I was asking them, what's the biggest objection? The utilities was one of the ones they were fumbling with. So I said, okay, well, tell me the utilities. I asked each one of them each time, and I asked them about security because it's always one of the big ones in our industry. Oh, we don't offer security. So you have to be sure that they understand that and how to actually answer that. And we went through additional objections and how to overcome those objections. And it's a process. It takes time. And management companies will tell you they're doing it. But if you don't have a method as the owner to ensure it, now you have the mystery shoppers. A lot of times they know who the mystery shoppers are. So my thing is, if you listen to all the calls, you show up at the property and you do mock tours with them, you're gonna learn way more. Simple. Grab the leasing agent and said, okay, ring, ring, start with the phone and go through the process. They usually, okay, here's something else I want to point out. Almost every management company has a list of questions they're supposed to ask. And you'll get this. What's your name? Ring, ring. What's your name? Very aggressively because they have a checklist and they're just going down the checklist instead of saying, hey, do you mind if I get your name? Oh, that's nice. Your name's Tim. Okay, Tim. Well, when are you moving in? And just like make it conversational and make it interesting and don't make it just routine, just a boring, like they're literally just checking the box because they don't want to get in trouble for not asking the questions. So it's a matter of they have to memorize the actual list, yes, but they have to learn how to do it with finesse. They have to learn how to become a salesperson, not an order taker. Now, is this required everywhere? No. There are some markets. The lady that I was telling you with the property was always 97%. She was an order taker. She didn't have to do any training at all. She was the only game in town. She was always going to be full. But if you have a property where you're in a knife fight, you better make sure your team is actually doing the job correctly. And I cannot tell you how often I've dug in and studied. And I'll give you another story. So we had a property. We were in a lease up. This is in Clemson, Georgia. I'm not going to mention names, but I was saying to myself, why aren't we leasing? We have two days where we got people there full time and we're not leasing. I don't understand why. And they kept saying, oh, well, we're there. Nothing's happening. Nothing's happening. So I had my assistant call 4 times a day at different times, and she had a log. And we did it for 3 weeks. And sure enough, we discovered that they were not there 2 or 3 times. They weren't there at all. So we discovered they weren't even showing up, even though they were telling me we were, and we were being charged payroll as if we were, but they weren't even there. Once they started showing up, imagine that, we started leasing. Wow, they answered the telephone.
Ken, you mentioned earlier that switching management companies comes with a cost. And a lot of times the fear of dealing with this cost of transitioning to another management company makes owners not change company, stay with the same company. However, there's also a cost of staying with a bad management company. How do you mitigate this? How do you balance? Is there a system that you have to say, okay, that was it, up to here? Like, I can't keep taking hits. I'm gonna change the management company. Where do you reach that point? What's your system? I'm curious.
Well, the first thing is fraud. If in fact the upper people in the management company are fraudulent in any way at all, they have to be fired. That's a non-starter. Fraud at the site level is a little more nuanced, especially if the management company didn't know about it. But that may be ineffective systems or bad processes or something like that. I would say next to fraud, obviously, is just gross incompetence, and you have to balance that out because there's different levels of gross incompetence. You could have a situation where they're not filing dispos correctly and the bad debt's ballooning and they're not on it. And you direct them to do on it, and then they don't do what you say multiple times. There comes a point of frustration in which you say, okay, look, I made multiple attempts to get this situation resolved. You put it in writing, you let them know. At some point, you have to make a change. And it's very painful because usually it's 2 weeks. The site goes down because they're transferring software. I know it's 2026, and yet Yardi and Entrada, they still act like they're a 2000 company. It's ridiculous. But you also get the team totally focused on the new training, the new software, the new setup, the new procedures. And then you get the on-site team. They're terrified of the new boss. They don't know who they're going to get. So there's this total fear, and it's a step back operationally, no doubt about it. The site, you can think all you want. Anytime you change management companies, you're going to lose at the site level, and it's going to cost you money. So you have to balance that operational inefficiencies with the cost of the switch. And it's definitely painful. And by the way, that's one of the things the management companies have working for them as a moat. It's painful to switch, and they know it. It requires real incompetence or fraud to really make an owner push somebody out. Usually you're selling the deal and you just don't hire them back. That's typically how it runs down.
Ken, what is one question that a average operator will be fearful of being asked and an excellent operator will look forward to when you interview them?
I think okay, it depends on, you talking to the salesperson or you talking to the actual person running the portfolio or running the company. Because if it's just a salesperson, they're going to give you the surface level answers. If it's somebody that actually knows the business, they can actually, and this was a conversation I had many years ago, back when the company wasn't that big. I think we only had 10,000 units, and there was a company that had double the number of units, and they were a partner of the Atlanta President Association. They were a very, very esteemed company. And I went and met with them, and I had a whole list of questions. And I was so excited to meet with these people because I wanted to learn. And I sat down and started asking all these detailed questions, and their eyes glazed over. They had no clue what I was talking about. And I was scratching my head. Somebody at that company knew that stuff, but they did not. And and by the way, it's not a bad thing. You have to have salespeople in your organization. Nothing happens without a salesperson. And a lot of the top level people, they're not necessarily the operators. They're not the ones in the trenches that know the numbers, that really understand what drives the business and all the metrics. And sometimes you're talking to the person and they may be the incredible salesperson that raised the equity, that closes the deals, but they have no clue how it's actually being done at the site level and the execution. So when you start asking detailed questions, you start seeing whether or not they truly know the business or they just surface level. And they should be able to tell you all the things they tried and it didn't work. Like, oh, I went down and I tried this, that didn't work. I tried this, that didn't work. I'll give you a great example. We had a property that had, we were getting all these people walking across from the street over, and they were jumping our fence. And they were coming on and breaking into cars and causing all sorts of problems. So the first thing we did is we increased the size of the fence. Logical. Well, then they just kept climbing over the fence. I was like, well, we got to do something else. So I went and bought a bunch of axle grease, and we put the axle grease all over the thing. As soon as we did that, nobody wanted to climb the fence anymore because it was covered in axle grease. So that worked. But that's an example of, we tried one thing, it didn't work. We tried something else, it didn't work. So I think you just have to be willing to say, hey, I don't know the answer. Let's figure this out. There has to be a solution. Someone else has figured this out. What else can we do? Let's dig into it. And I do believe that there are operators who are surface level. They don't know a lot. And by the way, not the bad people. Let me be very clear. You can be incredibly successful. Some of these people are incredibly wealthy in their surface level because they have people like me that they run the details. That's their job. So you have to be very clear when you're talking about that question as to who you're speaking to.
What is one answer that you're getting in a conversation that you have when interviewing a third party that will make you say to yourself, I would never hire this company?
Well, I think, and we've touched on this, if it's an owner manager and the ratio's flipped, where they have 10,000 units they're managing, and only have 1,000 third-party managers, I'm going to be really skeptical of using them on my property just because they're an owner manager and they can be competing with me. That would be one. The other one is if they're just full of shit. And what I mean by that is, are they telling me numbers that just don't make sense? So they tell me, oh, your R&M, our budget, it'll be $700 a unit. Oh, your payroll is going to be $1,000 a unit. Really? That just tells me you're incredibly disconnected from what reality is, or you have no clue what you're doing, and you lose all credibility. I see this a lot with these vendors who want to pitch these deals, and they're telling you how much all this money you're going to save, and these case studies that are so laughable. You're like scratching your head. They lose all credibility. And they're like, people don't care about the numbers. Yeah, people do care about the numbers. The problem is we don't believe the numbers you're telling us.
Ken, what is one question that every ownership group should ask when interviewing a third-party management, and almost nobody is asking?
Give me an example of a property that you guys took over and you screwed up, and what'd you do about it?
I love it. Don't tell me, show me.
Yeah. And be very specific with it and get into the details. How much did it cost? What'd you do about it?
If they actually done it, they'll be able to walk you through.
Absolutely.
If not, it's never going to go below surface, as you
Yeah.
were mentioning a few times in the conversation. Ken, incredible as always. Thank you so much for being here on the set today. And I hope you'll enjoy the conversation. Drop some comments in the comment box and leave us a message. We're going to put the documents that Ken has prepared for you in the show notes so you guys could get the most value that you could get out of this podcast. See you on the next one.